Order. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Today's agenda is to talk about tuition and fees and provide an opportunity for public comment. I do want to share that there was an opportunity for people to sign up to make public comments at this meeting today, and there was no one who signed up. Donna has also provided an opportunity for people to provide comments via an online opportunity and has distributed the 3 comments that were received. There were 4 people who started and 1 didn't finish with any comments. So apparently 1 is staff, 1 is administration, and the other one is a student. So we have kind of a breadth of individuals, but again, only 3 comments total have been received to date. So this meeting, Tawana is going to take the baton. I want to remind the board members that this meeting is really to provide an opportunity for public comment. We will have during the board meeting a full session to discuss the final recommendations. I think what Tawana is going to be talking about is possibly a range. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. Okay. And with that, I would like to turn the speaker over to Tawana Moore, who will walk us through. And this, again, just remind everyone, this is available for Zoom participation. And so with that, I will turn it over to Tawana.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you to everyone for coming today. I'm going to talk about 3 things. I'm going to go over a brief overview of the budget and explain how those parts and pieces fit together. I'm going to talk briefly about tuition and how that fits into that model, and also present the range of tuition and fees that will be considered for us in terms of where we're going with tuition and fees. So the first slide is just our mission statement, and what we're trying to do here is to help students to become enlightened citizens that lead meaningful and productive lives. And I would argue that we do that. I'm proud to be a part of it, and it's the driving force for everything that we do. So let's look at JMU by the numbers. How are we doing? Our freshman retention rate is 90%, which I think is great. We have a 6-year graduation rate of 81%, and work-based learning internships. 2 of every 3 students has a work-based learning internship opportunity. Now, this could be in a traditional internship. It can be student teaching. It can be a practicum requirement or a clinical rotation. But 63% of our students have an opportunity to do some form of a work-based learning. 26% of our students actually have more than 1 opportunity. So I feel like we've really strived to include that. It's helpful for our students when they graduate to be able to use that for their resumes. And it's something that we're really proud of here. So how are we doing nationally? If you look at the rankings, we're number 64 in public national universities in the U.S. News and World Report. We're in Time Magazine's top 100 of the best colleges for future leaders. And we're number 7th for best college campuses, according to niche.com. Now, the point on this slide that I'm the most proud of is in the top right-hand corner. It's the JMU graduates and their career outcomes. 96.3% of our students in 2022 had a career outcome when they graduated. They either had a job, or they were going to graduate school, or they joined the military. They were all ready, which is exactly what our mission statement says. We're trying to prepare students so that when they leave JMU, they're ready for the next step of their lives. And 96.3% of our folks did. So let's look at the budget. This slide basically says we're a small city within Harrisonburg, and our budget is about $724 million. And this slide shows where the revenue comes from, the different parts and pieces that make it up. And you see this pie chart, the tuition and fees is 36.3%, general funds 23.7%, General funds are the funds that are given to us from the Commonwealth of Virginia to support the institution. Auxiliary enterprises, those are the business type things, auxiliary programs that we have on campus. These are self-supporting units, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But basically, there are services that are provided by the campus, like parking, housing, dining, those sorts of things. And those departments have to support themselves 100%. They get no funding from the Commonwealth for anything. So everything that happens to them, they have to pull their own wagon. And then finally, sponsor programs is 6.5%. So all of these pieces make up the total budget that we have of $724 million. And then this slide shows where the dollars get spent. And you can see the purple section is education in general. Now, what education in general stands for is that the academic side of the house. That's the instruction, the classrooms, the libraries, advising, those sorts of things. You see that we spend the majority of our money there, which we should. We're a higher institution, a higher ed. Auxiliary enterprises, again, if you're paying your own way and you have operations like those, you're going to have expenses associated with them. So 33.5% of our expenditures are in auxiliaries. 6.3% is financial assistance and scholarships, and then sponsored programs is the 6.5%. But let me talk a little bit about this purple section. And you can see that of this purple section of the education in general dollars, the majority of that purple is spent in instruction and academic support. So we spend our money in the classrooms, in the libraries, in the places that are affecting students and the learning outcomes that they're getting. So the majority, 67.3 cents of every dollar is spent in that instruction and academic support. And then you see the other categories, institutional support, the physical plant, student services going down. So this is a slide that just basically shows a little bit about our history from support from the Commonwealth. If there was another pie chart when I got here in 1999, it was about 50-50. We had about half of our support coming from the Commonwealth and half of it was coming from tuition. You fast forward to 2014, you see that tuition made up 69.7% of our money from E&G, and the states provided around 30%. If you come to 2024, the state's up to 39.6% that they provide. And over time, part of the reason that that's happened is because when we have salary and benefit increases for our employees, the Commonwealth funds half of that. So there's a lot of that money has come because over time there has been salary increases. Now that's a good thing to remember when we talk about salary increases. It's important to note, and you'll hear people refer to this as the fund split. When there's a salary increase, for instance, there's a proposed 3% salary increase for this coming year. The Commonwealth will give us half of the money for all E&G positions, and the university will be expected to fund the other half. So that's for E&G. There's a fund split. They give us half, we fund half. In the auxiliary areas, we have to fund 100% of that salary increase because those are self-supporting entities and they do not receive any support from the Commonwealth. So this looks at, if we just hone in on the E&G budget, this looks at the E&G budget, including financial aid. So our E&G, our education in general budget for the institution for this year is $434.5 million. And it's made up 59.2% is coming from tuition, 39.6% is coming from general funds, and then there's a very small amount of miscellaneous. Go ahead. And then this slide, I think is one of the most telling. This shows where the expenditures from the education in general department, this is how that money is spent. So if you look at this pie chart, the purple, the gold, the green, and then that different shade of green is all labor. 74.7% of this budget goes for people. Now that stands to reason. We're an institution, we're predominantly in a classroom. We have students coming here, they're in the classroom, the employees are here on the campus. So 74.7% is people. Then what you have is this maroon 25.3%. That's the part that I have that's actually expendable, because the other half, the other 3/4 is people. Now, if you look at this other 25% that we have that I can actually, actually make some changes with, 10.5% of that is scholarships and financial aid. So what it comes down to is once we deal with the people and financial aid and scholarship, I have 15% of the dollars in the E&G budget that I can actually use. And that's where I would be looking to fund the other half of the salary increase. So I don't have a whole lot of leeway. And you can see all the things that the money goes for. Continuous charges, contractual services, computing, equipment. It's all the things that the people on the other side of this pie chart need to do their jobs in order for us to be successful. Okay. So then this chart, let's take a look at where we fall if we compare all of the other institutions to JMU. So this is all the 15 colleges in the Commonwealth. And if you look here to the far right with the box around it, this is JMU. This is our general fund amount, is the dark purple, and then the light purple is our financial aid. And you see that we're significantly lower than the average of all of those institutions. We're $2,470 lower than the average of all the other institutions. Our financial aid is lower as well. If we were to come up to the average, just the average, it would be $40 million for us. So I would argue that JMU does an amazing job. We have a 96% satisfaction rate with our students, and we've got a 96.3% career outcome. They're happy and they're also employed. And we're doing it, and we're funded the very last of all the institutions in the Commonwealth. Go ahead, Donna. So then this is all in. This takes a look at our funding from the Commonwealth, our financial aid, and then our tuition. Our tuition is very low as compared to the others, and I'll get to that in a minute. I'll show you that as well. So again, if you look at all of those factors and you see how they vary among the institutions, again, we're at the very last. So this is what we're up against. Go ahead, Donna. So if we switch over to the auxiliary budget just for a second, I did want to go over kind of how that budget works, those parts and pieces, because it's a little bit different than the education in general. On the left side of the screen is the auxiliary revenues. These are all the things that are coming in to support auxiliary areas. This budget, the total is $242.5 million. The comprehensive fee is the biggest revenue driver on the auxiliary side. The board fee is 22.7. That stands to reason. We have one of the biggest dining programs in the country. And then non-fee revenue, which is things like gate receipts at athletics, stuff like that. The room fee, and then a very small sliver is the parking fee. And then if you look on the expenditure side, again, because auxiliaries has to cover everything, they have to pay for everything that they do. You will see the compensation for them. Repair and maintenance is in here because when things break, they have to pay the physical plant to fix them. You see debt in here because as an auxiliary, I'll give you an example. For parking is an example of an auxiliary. They have to pay for every parking lot, every parking deck. They have mortgages, just like you would have on a house. They have to pay debt every year on those types of things. They pay for all the employees, they pay for lighting, snow removal, striping, anything that has to do with that operation, they pay for. So you see those things here. The one I would call your attention to is this agency service charge. I came up through the auxiliaries and I remember thinking, this is so unfair. But we actually have to pay a portion back to the E&G budget for any of the offices that the auxiliaries use. So for instance, use parking again. They use human resources, you know, the employees, they use their services, procurement, all the different offices that do things for auxiliaries. We have to pay a portion back to the E&G side to compensate them for using that. So when I mean they pay their way, they pay for everything. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of an overview about the auxiliaries. I'm not going to go over this in all of its entirety. This is just the budget process workflow. We basically are working on budgets all the time. When we go and we present to the Commonwealth our 6-year plan, that is reviewed by the board, and we're continually working on. When we get the budget settled for this year, it seems like we immediately start working on next year. So we're asking departments, what do you need? What do you know, we get initiatives, all that sort of stuff. So where we are is in this far right corner at this tuition and fee proposal, which will happen at the next board meeting. And then hopefully approval at that point. But this is kind of all of the things that the budget office is doing throughout the year. Go ahead. So this slide is actually the left side, the JMU bubble represents the budget. And these are all the things that we have to consider when we're building the budget with Diane and her folks, and then as we work across the campus and also with the Commonwealth and with the board, because the board approves our 6-year plan. If you look, initially the strategic plan is the 6-year plan is part of that. And that kind of drives the things that we do in the budget. We're constantly looking at efficiencies. And I've talked to the board many times about some of the different things that we're doing with our efficiencies and things that we've done to save money. We are currently in the process of having an efficiency review here on campus by an outside consultant to make sure if there are things that we're not doing where we could be more efficient, we want to make sure that we're doing that. It also says reallocations there. And I will tell you, for the last several years, you know, when we ask departments, what kinds of things do you need? We call them cost to continues. What do you need? What things do you have in your budget that you need to have funded? And they turn in millions of dollars of stuff. And for the last 2 years, we have not funded them. And so they're having to reallocate and pick, what do they have to pay for? What are they going to forego? What equipment do they maybe they don't buy a new piece of equipment this year. They wait because they need software more. They're having to reallocate money the same as we reallocate from a central standpoint. We look at compensation and benefits. If the budget goes through as it's proposed, if the governor approves it, there is a 3% salary increase. And also there is an increase in benefits. It's $964 per employee. So between compensation and benefits, the JMU piece, our part of that expense is about $5 million. So that's the part we have to pay for, not the part that'll be provided by the Commonwealth. We put tuition policy on here because sometimes when you do the budget, sometimes there'll be language in there that says, we'll give you this money, but you can't raise tuition more than X, or sometimes there's parameters in there. At this point, there hasn't been any in what we've seen, but we'll see once the budget is approved, hopefully, if it will be. Obviously, we have to be aware of enrollment. If you don't make your enrollment numbers, it's a direct implication for the budget. If you miss your out-of-state or in-state, your enrollment mix, it can have a factor on your budget. And so we have to watch that. unfunded mandates is a very expensive thing for us. Sometimes the Commonwealth will do things, they'll have mandates, a salary increase for one is a mandate. But they do things like they have implemented the military dependent survivors program, which is a wonderful program that provides free tuition and fees for dependents of veterans that were hurt or killed in a war. And they put that into place, and we all agree it's a wonderful program. And I'm a military brat. I think it's a wonderful thing. But they didn't fund it. And so it's cost all of higher ed a significant amount of money. It has cost JMU $6 million. And so we've had to continue to find that money because just this year we had 360, I think that's right, 360 students that participated in that program, and it just continues to increase. And it's a huge expense for us that we have to figure out a way to pay for. So that's an example of an unfunded mandate. State funding obviously is just what the Commonwealth ends up providing for us. Utilities are always an expense, and then inflation. Everybody's been to the gas pumps and into the grocery stores. You know that things are more expensive than they were, and obviously that's something that we have to consider. So those are all the things that will go into the budget as we build it. So this is a slide because I wanted to know if we compared ourselves to comparable universities that our students could have gone to, how are we faring if we're looking at efficiencies and the amount of money that we're spending? And this comes from the State Council of Higher Education. These are figures that we pulled from there. And we did a comparison, and you'll see this is University of Virginia on down. And James Madison, once again, we're on the low end of the scale in terms of what we spend per full-time equivalent student to educate a student. So I'm really proud of the things that we've done and how efficient we've been. Now, granted, all institutions aren't created equal. Some have different programs than we do. Some are more expensive. But when you get down to the end, I would argue they're very comparable. And I think we're doing really well when you look at how much our expenses are. And again, we have a 96% satisfaction rate with our students, and they're getting jobs. So what we're proposing, and let me be clear to this group over here, these students, I'm so glad that you came. What I'm proposing is a range. So I am not saying that JMU is going up 4%. What I'm saying is that's the max we could pending board approval, but I'm not saying we're raising tuition 4%. So we good? So the range that we proposed was anywhere from 0 to 4% for a Virginia undergraduate for tuition. It would be anywhere from 0 to $316 per year. So that's $158 per semester. For an out-of-state student, it's 0 to 1.5%, which is 0 to $368 for the year, or $184 per semester. Now, one might ask, why are you going up 4% for in-state and only 1.5% for out-of-state? Well, if you look at the dollars, we were trying to get it where it's pretty close in terms of the amount of dollars. So that's why the percentages are lower. If you look at the Virginia graduate tuition, a 0 to 4% is 0 to $20 per credit hour. And for an out-of-state student, it's 0 to $18, which is, again, is 0 to 1.5. So when we talk about undergraduate comprehensive fee, it is a 0 to 3% increase is the range. So the maximum it could be is 3. And that's 0 to $168, which is $84 a semester. For graduate students, it's 0 to 3.9, which is $0 to $2 per credit hour. And then at this April meeting, we also do summer school at the same time. So, and we use the same percentages, the 0 to 4% for undergraduate tuition, which will result in $0 to $16 per credit hour. For an out-of-state undergraduate, it's 0 to 1.5% or $0 to $15. If we talk about graduate students, Virginia graduate tuition is $0 to $19. And then out-of-state graduate is $0 to $17. But again, those percentages are the same. And for summer school, all students, the required auxiliary student fee would be, the range is $0 to $1. So that's for summer. So those are the ranges. So then this I wanted to talk to you about, because this time of year, you'll start to see a lot of articles come up in the paper, and they'll compare percentages, and they'll say, William and Mary went up 3%, and whoever, you know, they compare us all, and they always talk about percentages. And we always asked that people talk about the dollars, because this chart, it will illustrate what I'm talking about. This is a chart that shows the difference between 1%. So this is this year's fee, but 1% for William and Mary is $184. 1% for JMU is $79. That's for a year. So when someone says something about a 3% increase for William and Mary, that's a lot more money than what you're talking about if you do a 3% increase for JMU. So I just ask that when you see those articles, remember to think about the percentage versus the dollars, because our percentages are so low. And that middle bullet, I think, really speaks to how low our tuition is. Our in-state tuition is 21% less than the average of all the 15 together. That's significant. Go ahead, Donna. So this chart shows the shaded areas are if we went to the maximum of the range, which again, I'm not saying we will, but if we went to the maximum, those are the new prices for us. And this is against everyone's current price for this year. So this is this year's rates for everybody else and the proposed highest next year's rates. And I would call your attention to these two columns that are closest to me, because you write one check when you go and you pay your tuition and fees. And you'll see that even if we went to the highest in our range, if you compare that higher amount versus this year's rate for everyone else, we're still 9th in terms of expense for students compared to the other 15. If you're out of state, it's 10th. So I think we're providing an excellent value for students with excellent outcomes, and I think our kids are predominantly, they're pleased. So I had a few takeaways that I wanted to leave you with. If we look at the 4-year average for in-state tuition increases for JMU, our 4-year average is 1.5%. The consumer price index for the same time period, 4.4. If you look specifically at the higher ed price index, it's 3.5. So we stayed significantly below all the ratings that we can compare ourselves to. Again, if you compare us with the other 15 institutions in the Commonwealth, we rank 11th lowest if you have everything in, all in, room and board, everything. We operate with the lowest general fund support from all of the institutions in the Commonwealth. And then probably the most important bullet, we offer educational quality and affordability with high graduate outcomes and alumni, it's easy for me to say, alumni who live and work in the Commonwealth. So I thank you for your time today, and I appreciate you coming.
All right. Thank you, Tawana. So at this point, I think the meeting is adjourned. As we received no comments. Okay. Thank you very much for everyone for attending. We really appreciate the opportunity to make sure you guys understand how this comes together and the implication of it. Okay, thank you very much. And with that, our meeting is adjourned. I